All right, how's everybody?
I'm just great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing
I'm
great.
good.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, of course. So if you guys look in chat, there is an agenda for everything, just with the topics and everything to go over. So first, I just want to I just want to let you know I'm just really proud of you guys' work. Between Povohat and Raw Accel, you guys have completely changed the game. So, first off, thank you for that. But as we're going in, let's start off by what is your favorite mouse? And if so, Ergo or Ambi? And well, first your name, but also then your grip type, your Excel curve, and then what games do you play? Then maybe a little bit about you guys' background as well.
Povohat, I'm gonna let you go first.
Oh, thanks, Mike. All right, so mouse right now and for the last several years, it's literally just been the wheel mouse optical. I know it's a bit of an ES reality meme, but that's the shape that I enjoy. So obviously that puts me in the ambidextrous kind of grip, the ambi shape. I'm not going to try and say that word. The grip type, I'd say it's like a claw because I'm one of those people that has, I think you guys call it like a 1-3-1 grip. We've got the 3 fingers on the top of the mouse. Accel curve. At this point, I'm not playing a lot or pretty much any FPS games anymore. But I moved away from Accel and was just using just a flat, 1-to-1 sort of response. But I can talk a bit more about what I thought was important when I was playing enough games to really get the feel for an Accel curve. What games do you play? Right now, pretty much not FPS games, like literally just Super Mario World Kaiser ROM hacks on controller. But if I sort of go back to when I was playing FPS games, it was pretty much Quake Live, TF2, and Quake World. I think that pretty much puts us onto you, Moose.
Nice. Hey, what's up, I'm Moose. I have currently a Zygen MP01 mouse, so it's kind of an ergonomic mouse. I've used to play with a G Pro wireless and also an MX518, so I just kind of use whatever, honestly. I'm always excited to try something new. I guess my grip type is somewhere between like a palm grip and a claw grip. And then for Accel curve, I like Accel curves that do all their acceleration or most of it at the really low speeds, so that by the time I move my hand pretty fast, there's no more acceleration. And that is really good, I think, for the games I play, which is Counter-Strike and Valorant. Those are the games I play like where I'm actually trying to win and playing with other people who try to win. But then, like, when I'm not playing those, I'll play, like, whatever FPS game that's fast and looks fun. Like, recently I was playing Quake 2 RTX or, like, Ghost Runner or anything like that that takes moving around fast, shooting things up.
Yeah. And then, hi, I am Andy, AndrewCanDoPodcast, and my favorite mouse is, well, right now I'm really liking the M1K, which is a fingertip mouse, which is really rare for me. I also find my favorite ergo mouse is the KPU or the Extra 5 M4, but I still have I have some other ones staying over here, like the Razer Pro Click, the Faceit AC, some other things that I really need to give a try. My grip type, if I'm using a fingertip mouse, then that will end up being the play. But otherwise, I typically use like a claw. So that's kind of like the go-to. And then when the Accel curve I've been using now has been a Motivity that I've kind of really gotten figured out with Simon, one of the other guys who's worked on Raw Accel. Before that, I used a linear. I used a linear curve with the cap. And that was like going from 64 centimeters to like maybe 42 centimeters. But now I started around like 52 centimeters, and this goes up to like 36 centimeters. I really like the Motivity because it kind of moves its way up. It's for all my tracking purposes, it's really around 52 centimeters. And then it smoothly goes up to something like, I think 36 centimeters for a little while for flicks. Um, and then games I play, I typically play shooters, fast-paced shooters. Obviously, I play a lot of Shoot Mania, but now I'm playing Diabolical. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much the only game I've been playing recently. In Kovacs, of course. So the next question I've got for you guys is, what got you into Excel? You know, what led to this whole endeavor in the first place?
Do you want me to? I'll jump in if you want.
Yeah, I think historically it makes first sense if you start first.
Yeah, we'll do it in chronological order then. Okay. So what got me into it? I think I didn't really. I was, in that camp of, and a lot of people were sort of back then, where any acceleration is no good. And I think it was when Quake Live started to get kind of big. I remember, watching like Quake Live on ESL and all that sort of stuff, and sort of getting into that and wanting to play Quake Live and playing it a lot, and just realizing, like, you download configs, you do the whole node thing, and you find that all these people using acceleration, like mouse acceleration, particularly like the Eastern European sort of players and people that were copying that. But the problem is, like, yeah, that's cool for Quake Live. You type it in and it feels that way in that game, but it doesn't feel like that in other games, and that's sort of a bit of a problem. But it really was just a case of, why aren't I as good at doing these things as the people I'm watching? And what's the difference in their config? Oh, they've got some sort of Excel kind of thing going on. And just trying that out and being curious about it, and seeing what that does for a game.
Yeah, so I'm kind of similar. I learned like FPS games with Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, a really old game now. and then I switched. That kind of died like 2010-ish, and so I switched to Quake. And I had learned in Wolfenstein Enemy Territory to play without Excel. And then, similar to Povohat here, I saw people in Quake Live who were very good at things that I was not good at, and I was wondering what I could do to improve. And I learned that their mouse acceleration was kind of different. Mouse acceleration has even meant different things, and so I kind of learned that what Quake's is something I liked. And then I switched to Counter-Strike later because all my friends were playing Counter-Strike, and I could still aim fine without mouse accel, but it just wasn't as comfortable, and I kind of missed it. And so Counter-Strike had inbuilt Excel that has some problems, but one of the modes is still pretty good, and so I got pretty good with that mode.
Okay. For me, I got into Excel because I was playing like 90 CM at one point. I got into the bad habit of making sure your mouse pad is always going to be a 360 for you. I was doing that with the desk pad, which I loved because I just loved low sense in general. But as I tried moving to smaller pads that I just preferred, I knew that I would need something faster. So like with the Gleep pad and the Shooting Kai, I knew I would need to be on a higher sense, but I still like that tracking. So Excel was a good way for me to kind of smooth that gap. And also for me, in Kovacs, I always had problems with my smoothness, and really in all games with my smoothness. And I found that Excel, for tracking, it does a lot. It does a lot for helping with that smoothness. So I really like that. And I just kind of got hooked ever since.
I just want to jump in for a sec. It seems like, and I don't know if we should talk about this a bit later on, but like the reasons that we're using Excel, it seems like, rather than like the way that we're using it, rather than being called acceleration, I feel like we're kind of using it to decelerate low speeds rather than sort of increase it at the top end. And I think that might be the case for a lot of people. It's more about getting the precision at the low end rather than sort of getting like faster response at the top end. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, that's a really really good point. Um, that's exactly what we're doing.
I
Yeah.
think it makes sense, but I would also say that I always try to be very careful about terminology because people expect things to mean what they're used to expecting, right? And so if you try to go in and change a term, that tends to, confuse people or even make them upset. And I imagine that if we called it mouse deceleration, some people would confuse that with negative acceleration, even though, we know what it means, which is faster movement, higher sensitivity.
Yeah, I think it'd end up being like the Windows checkbox that says enhance pointer precision.
Yeah.
Which is forever ruined. There's forever tarnished the name of Excel.
Yeah. It was a really good solution to mouse acceleration in 1995, and it was already a bad solution by 2000, but they never got around to modernizing it.
I think and kind of piggybacking on, I think something that me and Povohat talked about earlier before the call started. I think how other companies really implement acceleration, like Razer and SteelSeries early on with their mouse drivers, it really didn't give the person enough flexibility. So people try and they're like, I can't tweak it to the same degree that I want to. Even like Apex has Excel, but it's just a toggle you click on. You have no idea what it's doing.
Oh, really? It's just binary? It's just on or off?
Yeah, it's just on or off.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, not good at all. But it creates a bad taste in your mouth for Excel because you don't understand how granular it can be.
Well, I gotta be honest. Oh, you go.
Oh, yeah. I think that there's been a few vendors that have decided to implement that. I remember, like in Logitech Setpoint, there was like just a couple of options, like Excel, like off, or option A, B, or C, and the same with Razer. I'm not familiar with a lot of the other vendors, but it's really weird that they would put in just these settings that had absolutely zero tweakable options. It was very weird.
Yeah. Currently, chat's saying that it is a 0.05 exponent using the source engine default settings for Apex.
Oh.
God,
that's actually the mode I was talking about in Counter-Strike that I kind of like. It has some problems, but it's not the worst.
This is a really interesting question. When I first ran the Povohat a while back, he was talking about just the early days on the overclock network forums and stuff. So what was it like in the early days in the mouse community, Povohat? Because you've been around. I mean, you've practically been around since they started. You were in the mouse community. So,
I was there when the first mouse was born, obviously. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how old people are nowadays. I assume that people just keep getting younger. But I mean, I was playing games, before people trusted optical mice. There were a couple of, dodgy early ones, like the Microsoft IntelliMouse Explorer or something, the 1.0. I bought one of those and returned it the same day. It was total trash. But yeah, anyway, the early stuff. I remember the first time I really thought about that one mouse could be better than another was probably on ES Reality when Sujoy did the mouse score comparison. This was like 2007. You might be able to look that up. But essentially just got a whole bunch of popular mice and put them on a turntable to sort of graph their sort of maximum tracking speeds and things like that. And I think some of the terminology that people were using continued. It was sort of born in that article. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, when did I'm trying to think when I decided to look on the overclock mouse forum. I think there were some good people on there. Like the thing with mice is that there's a lot of subjectivity. People are going to prefer a certain shape or certain feel, and getting objective information is very difficult. But there are a couple of people. There was one guy, I can't remember his name. He seemed like he was sort of an industry insider. He seemed to know a lot about sensors, but he was very cautious about not saying too much about who he worked for or what sort of project he'd worked on. But yeah, some other guys on there that came on a bit later, like who were some really nice people in there? There's Wall3, there was Inno. I think, is he still around? Inno is this European guy. I think he does mouse reviews still. Obviously QSXCV, who is a absolute genius. I think that I'm not sure if he invented it, but he was certainly posting a lot about using like a teensy board and a random like 3360 sort of sensor and sort of making his own custom firmware and stuff. That was really cool. But yeah, the early stuff, just way too much subjectivity, especially when it came to things like, you know, optical versus laser. I'm not sure if, you know, laser, I can't really do air quotes with my voice, but laser mice, don't know if people still use those. I feel like that problem has been solved. There was just a lot of really weird people in different camps about what was, you know, better or worse or something like that. And I think now that I've got the ability to sort of remove a lot of the subjectivity, you've got these awesome aim tools, so an individual can get metrics on their performance, like with Kovacs, and I assume there's some other ones out there that I'm unfamiliar with. And as well as just, you know, people being very good about reviewing mice now. It's not about, you know, how is the shape nice? Does it have a nice soft touch rubber feel? You know, does it slide across my mouse pad nicely? There's a lot of things that people are looking at nowadays that are actually important. And I think that there's a lot more choice when it comes to mice. I think, you know, as much as I don't really enjoy a lot of Razer stuff, they were really there first in terms of being a company that really targeted gamers. And yeah, I think that we've got a lot of mice companies out there nowadays. You've got a lot of choice, and there's a lot of people that care about it. You've got the option to get a lot of good reviews. You don't have to go and burn a bunch of money buying dozens of mice to find out like why they're broken, essentially. Yeah, I guess the other notable thing that I want to mention is that Logitech makes some lovely mice. My most fond memory of a mouse from back in the day was actually the Logitech Mouse Man, which is a ball mouse, and it had this was before scroll wheels. It had 3 buttons across the top. It was very comfortable. I don't think I could use it nowadays, obviously, but that was what really kind of got me into thinking about mice being better than other ones. Was that one back in like 97 or something?
I just googled that. That's a weird looking mouse, man.
Yeah.
The Mouse Man, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a some sort of ergo shape. Unless you're talking about the Mouse Man that came out in 96, the one that looks like a triangular like piece of cheese.
I think I've seen that one.
They're all kind of weird looking. That's all I can say.
Yeah, the Logitech Wingman was like a black version of the original Mouse Man, and it's like a really strange, like almost triangular shape. But I think some people really enjoyed that. I was actually hoping. I remember when the first Razer mouse came out, like the Boom Slang came out, they were sort of teasing, "Oh, what's our next mouse going to be?" And it was going to be like a smaller mouse with 3 buttons across the top. But I don't think that ever actually surfaced, which is a shame. But I think they were supposed to be targeting people that liked the Logitech Wingman gaming mouse. But yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what the next mouse was. I think it was the Crate or something of that sort of shape. Anyway, I probably got way off topic. I'll just hand that back to you guys.
Oh, yeah. Here's a picture. Is this what you're talking about?
Oh God, no! Oh God, no! 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 One sec. I'll try and dig something up for you.
Okay. But yeah, so moving forward, this is a really good question for Raw Accel, for Mr. Moose. What? Oh, okay. Yeah, that looks great. What got you kind of motivated to do Raw Accel? Like, where I've heard bits and pieces of this story from Simon, but for everyone else, like, what is the story? How was Raw Accel born? And then also, how was Povohat born? I mean, Povohat's like the granddaddy of it all.
Yeah. So I started using Povohat back when I first played Counter-Strike to get that feeling from Quake. But then it was not allowed in ESEA, where I played on a few competitive teams. So I had to stop using it. Eventually, I settled on CSGO's mouse acceleration option, which I still think is pretty decent. However, it was not supported in interaccel, which was kind of the in-between of Povohat and Raw Accel, right? And I was decided to try to use interaccel to get my Counter-Strike curve everywhere. And in order to do that, I needed to extend interaccel, which is open source. And so I contacted Kovac about doing that, and he pointed me to City Youth, who was another person in this community who was extending interaccel. And so I started to add the power. I called it the power mode because it's kind of the input raised to a certain power in CSGO to make the curve. I added that to interaccel, and then right about then, Simon popped up in the forum and said, "Hey, I have this driver that works on the raw input queue that runs in the kernel. So we could get this signed, and we can get it working with all anti-cheat by default, right? This would not be a user space program that would be blocked. This would be kernel space where it could just run by default, and then we can make it anti-cheat proof and get it working everywhere." And so I said, that sounds like a really great idea. And I started working with him closely on that. And then it was really me and him focused on making a mouse driver that could work with all anti-cheat and run the kernel space, which he knew the details of better than I did. Working on that for a few months, I had some acceleration discoveries because now I was thinking about this really hard and I wanted to try some new things. So I came up with a few new modes. And then we released Raw Accel. So it was kind of just a two-person effort mostly. In terms of actual code, obviously Kovac and City Youth helped us chatting about it a lot and, contacting mouse Accel anti-cheat vendors and stuff. But it kind of came about by just working in the community together and him having the idea of a kernel driver.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And then also, I guess, going back a step further, how did the Povohat driver on top of interaccel, how did that become a thing?
Okay, so it was sort of born out of that frustration of I like the feel of Quake Live's mouse Accel implementation, but I can't use that in other games. Like I wasn't mainly playing Quake Live. I was mainly at that point, I think I was mainly playing TF2. And I don't think I was really playing Quake World too much at that point. So it was really just, I want to get Quake Live's acceleration everywhere. And I did some looking around, and I think I first sketched it up in an application called Glove Pie. Like glove, like the thing you wear on your hand, and then pie is in the thing that you eat, which is this it's a weird application that just lets you, I think it seems like it was mostly designed around people that wanted to use Wiimotes on PCs, but it gave you the ability to sort of hook into inputs and play with them. So I kind of sketched it up in that, but it wasn't great. It wasn't super responsive. And I thought there had to be kind of a better way. And when I was getting I was working out like the algorithm for the Accel stuff, it turns out someone had already sort of figured it out. It was a guy called INJX, however that's pronounced, on ES Reality. He already had the formula all sort of done. So I got some help from him to implement it into Glove Pie as like this weird script. But yeah, I wasn't super happy with that. So I did some more digging. It turns out there was a guy called Aion, AION. And I've got the link. Let's try and copy that down here so you guys can see it. It's from like late 2006, which was like 6 years before I thought about even getting started on this. But essentially that's what we have kind of worked from, in terms of, I didn't realize that you could do this, but there is an excellent kind of example program on the Microsoft site that is essentially designed like you just insert your code into it and it can modify how a mouse responds effectively. And so there was a lot of learning, because I've got a bit of a background in terms of just hobby coding, some very basic stuff. I'd never really delved into this sort of thing before. But I figured, throw enough time at it, I can probably figure something out. And after a lot of blue screening and lots of trial and error, I got something that started to work. And it was very cool to get that happening. And then but the thing is, like I said, I'm not really an actual programmer or developer or anything like that. I'm just inserting code and things like that. I don't know how all the code around.
That's how you learn, man.
Yeah.
That's how you learn, yeah. Pretty much. I mean, I guess people don't just go to school and learn exactly the skills they need to do just the one thing they want. It really is just about playing around and hacking something together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I didn't even consider the fact that I would release it. I didn't really consider that maybe people would want a user interface. I mean, even adding the ability to change the settings came in quite late. It was just going to be too much of a pain to keep recompiling and reinstalling the driver to use hard-coded settings all the time. But yeah, it seemed like some people were interested in it. I think I first released it on a Team Fortress site because I was a little bit worried about like the reception. I was like, so I thought, I'll just quietly mention it on, I think it was it teamfortress.tv, I think, at that point. I'll just put it down there and see if people are interested, and talked a little bit about it to some of my friends. And one of my friends, his name is Staffu, he's from like Western Australia, he's on the other side of the country. He put together a little user interface for it, which was really cool. And then a bit later on, Kovac, who I look up to, he's an absolute legend in the Quake world scene. I don't know, for you guys, I don't know, maybe you just know him as being like the Mouse Accel and the aim trainer guy. But he was
I've heard the legends of him in Quake World, yeah.
Yeah. He was a legendary North American player. I feel like he blossomed a little bit later than some of the other players in that scene, but he was absolute force. So he actually reached out to me. I was like a bit starstruck. And he built a really good user interface for that. I remember he made a video. He was playing, I don't know if you guys remember this game. It was called Loadout. It was this third-person sort of arena shooter kind of thing. He was demonstrating the acceleration program in Loadout. I was kind of blown away. So where are we at? That's pretty much the development, I suppose. But that's the original version. That's the driver version. So we had some issues with the driver version, and that's that since Windows, when was it? Since Windows Vista, I think they required you. Sorry, 1 second. I've just got to talk to somebody else. 1 sec, just like 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd just say that he mentioned that just filling in code from somewhere isn't a good way to learn. I would challenge that strongly.
I was gonna say that's the definition of a coder right there. Stack Overflow is life,
dude. Oh, for sure.
All Stack Overflow and documentation.
Your Googling skill is your most important skill.
Yes, 100%, 100%. You slowly learn the search terms that are gonna find you the results, and then what month to year ratio for the problem that you're looking for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you were talking about problems with the driver, Povohat.
Yes. Okay. So where were we at? Since like Windows Vista, Microsoft made it so if you wanted to install a driver, essentially like kernel mode code, it would have to be signed, which means that you have to purchase a certificate, which costs money. I think nowadays, I'm not sure. Last time I looked at it was several years ago, but it was quite expensive. It was in the
It cost us $400.
Yeah, which is pretty rough for a hobby kind of project for me. And we just dealt with that. It was just okay. We'll just load up Windows in test mode so that we can run the driver. But then apparently there's a lot of anti-cheat software that doesn't like you running in test mode because apparently cheats maybe they run in test mode. I have no idea. And so I was really not interested in worrying about signing stuff, getting I'm not going to bankroll it myself, and I felt very uncomfortable having other people put money forward for this certificate thing because I really was sort of beyond the point of caring about Excel at that point. I was like, well, you guys can do whatever you want. It's open source. I really don't care, but I don't want to be the one receiving a whole bunch of money and trying to figure out this code signing thing with no experience. And I kind of left it there. But sort of revisited it when I found out there was, I don't even know how I ran across this, but there's that interception library that's written by, was it like Pablo Francisco or something like that, which is essentially a driver that's already signed and it can just pass mouse stuff. It can intercept mouse stuff and keyboard stuff and pass them over to user mode applications. And I thought, well, we could just re-implement it like that. You don't need to run in test mode or disable code signing or whatever. But there's issues with that. But the fact is, you can get similar results without having to worry about doing weird stuff to your Windows installation. And my understanding is about that is, I think it was sometime this year, some of my old friends online were talking about like people getting banned from games, or like there was a team in, might have been Valorant or something. I think they were talking about Riot. So there was some team or anyway, so getting banned for using this interaccel thing. And I was like, oops. My bad, I suppose, but
Oops.
yeah, I guess there's some people that are like me but less scrupulous. There's people using this interception library for bad, and maybe it's getting triggered, or maybe there's just some sort of heuristics regarding like intercepting keyboard or mouse input and passing them over to a user mode application that makes it feel like it's a cheat, but it isn't. I don't know. But at that point, when was that? If that's earlier this year, I hadn't really played. That was April? Okay.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really played an FPS game since 2016, like about 4 years. I hadn't really been keeping up with it, or it was very interesting to know people were still interested and still using some form of customizable acceleration. So you can tell I've really been out of the scene for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really cool that this is actually still a thing. But I guess it's even more surprising that vendors haven't really caught up just yet. I feel like there could be some good things that that people could do. If you are the company that has the customizable Excel built into your driver software, that's a big leg up for the enthusiasts for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I could see that the next question you're going to ask me is about how we got Raw Accel whitelisted, right? So I think I can probably take over from here and answer some questions Povohat just had, which is about, well, kind of clarify some things he said. And so what was happening with the intercept library and why, I'm not sure if Riot has actually banned it, but someone reported that they're going to ban it. And the thing is that, that library can arbitrarily affect mouse input, and it runs in the kernel, in the raw input stack. So what I mean is it runs before a user space program is handed anything. And so that's really tough for an anti-cheat to do anything about other than banning it. And so because it can arbitrarily affect mouse input, a cheat can use it to aim for a person in the game, and unless the anti-cheat is monitoring interaccel specifically, the anti-cheat wouldn't know. And so one thing that anti-cheat vendors want out of a driver like this is to not allow it to arbitrarily affect mouse input. That means there's no input possible from any sort of other program that would immediately change the mouse output, in the game. And so that's also the reason we had to implement a 1 second delay on writing settings to the driver, so that when you press apply, your new settings are applied for a second. Because otherwise, you could apply some new settings that would make your next mouse movement, snap to someone's head or something, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was like the main feedback we got from the Faceit anti-cheat team. And Kovac is the one you kind of are leaning on his fame a little bit and his standing as a game developer to contact these anti-cheat vendors. And after we implemented that, we got explicit okay from them, and we got explicit okay from the Riot anti-cheat team. And so between those two, we're feeling pretty good about it. We probably at some point will reach out to ESEA and perhaps Easy Anti-Cheat and others, but at the moment, no one has banned it, and no one has any reason to ban it that we're aware of. And if someone does find a reason, which would definitely be like a bug or a hack exploit of it, it wouldn't be an intended possible use of the program, then we would fix that right away. Mm-hmm. So that's how that's working. And then earlier he was talking about cheats and test mode, and what's going on there is if you have your computer in test mode, you can kind of run anything in the kernel. Right, that's basically saying, hey, we're not checking that your code is signed before we run it in the kernel, and so it's very hard for an anti-cheat to allow arbitrary things. By not allowing arbitrary things, the anti-cheat can have a blacklist of things it doesn't allow. But if an anti-cheat allowed test mode, that blacklist would be useless, because you could just keep changing your code every day, right? You could just put a random hash in there and change it, and just avoid an anti-cheat blacklist. But if you have it signed and you don't have test mode on, you require the signature, then the anti-cheat can say, okay, either that you signed that driver, but that driver can be used to cheat, so we ban it. And so basically that's a way of giving, anti-cheat, or that's a way anti-cheat has control over what programs are allowed to run on your computer.
Yeah, that's a great deep dive onto that. Definitely answers the question. I guess furthering that, what about operating systems? I know recently there was a thing where Windows Defender was removing it. How'd you guys fix that? 'Cause I know I went into my settings and whitelisted it and everything, but you guys have to contact the Windows team, or is there anything that you had to change? Or
I think Simon would know better than me, because I haven't. I've kind of been focused on my real life work the last couple months. Mm-hmm. So he actually made this fix, but I think it was something really small and arbitrary, like including some file in the right spot or putting the certificate next to it, or there was something pretty simple that fixed the problem, I believe.
Awesome. Yeah, Simon's on it. He's an amazing resource. I've talked to him a lot. He actually helped me find my Excel curve. He sat with me on stream and played with me until I found a good Excel curve. So much love to Simon.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's super easy to get along with. I really like that about him.
Oh yeah, 100%. I guess the next thing I'd really like to ask about what was the development behind Motivity? I know when I was talking to Simon, he was like, Motivity was crazy, because I was asking what would it take to get Motivity implemented in something like Diabolical or future Quake games. I know it's got like natural gain and stuff. He was like, it was chaotic. I think he said something about you guys using like a table rather than. I was just curious what the calculation was to get something like that. So I guess could you give us a deep dive on, I guess just overall first, a deep dive on the various types of Excel that are in Raw Accel, and then how you were able to implement Motivity.
Okay, so there's a lot of parts to that question. Let me go part by part.
Yeah.
So for the different settings in Raw Accel, there are basically 4 kinds. Well, 5 kinds, whatever. There's the classic, which is you raise your input to an exponent, you multiply it by a constant, you add it to 1. And so that's the classic type and the linear type. And in linear type, the exponent is always 1. In the program, the setting is always 2, but that gets subtracted by 1 before raising happens. That causes a line, right? And then if you have the exponent as something else, that causes, either a concave or convex polynomial. And so then another type is power, where your input is raised to some exponent and not added to 1, and then directly multiplied by your input. And typically that exponent is very low, like below 1, like a 0.05 is the default in the CSGO curve, which is what I got good with in Counter-Strike. So that's the curve I like. So that was my addition, my first initial addition to interaccel and this whole thing, right? And then natural is kind of it's where you start at sensitivity 1, right? And then you have some limit, and you have a curve that nicely approaches that limit, like it's an asymptote, and you get to choose how fast it approaches that limit, right? And the natural gain is the same thing, but it's that curve is made in the derivative curve of your velocity. And what I just said some big words there that probably don't make a lot of sense to viewers. So I would recommend reading the Google document in the guide for Raw Accel, because that spells out step by step very clearly what I mean by the derivative of the velocity curve, which I also call gain. And then so natural gain, in other words, is the exact same thing as natural. It's just made in the gain graph instead of the sensitivity graph. Okay, so then Motivity was indeed the craziest setting we made, and it started as something else. It started as it's kind of like natural, but we're going to start at a sensitivity and then kind of have an S shape, to approach the limit, right? So instead of just starting at sensitivity and immediately shooting up and curving over to approach the limit, we're going to, kind of taper off from that initial sensitivity and then, go up and to the right. If you look at a Motivity graph, you can kind of see the S there. You kind of, see what I'm talking about. It's kind of hard to do without a visual here, but
yeah, I have a visual going up too.
Yes. I wanted to implement that curve in interaccel, and at the time I called it sigmoid, and sigmoid is like the mathematical term for a curve that looks like an S, like that. Mm-hmm. And so, then I came up with the idea of gain separately, and I said, okay, I should make that graph in the gain graph instead, and I called it sigmoid gain. And then I could talk about this for a long time, so we need a short version. There was a person who wanted to contribute to the project who no longer is talking to us for various reasons.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And I promised that person to present their ideas in a nice light, so I'm going to only focus on that. And they thought it was really important that it was presented in a certain way. A curve like that was presented in a certain way. They had by themselves come up with essentially the same curve, which they would claim has some important differences. And one of those differences was that it was on a log-log scale, and that you only had one parameter for the user to dictate, which is the Motivity parameter in the program, and that instead of that parameter dictating the limit, it would dictate both the starting sensitivity and the limit around 1, right? So it would vary from, and on a log-log graph, that looks like it's the same distance above and below 1. So, 0.5 and 2 look like they're the same distance from 1 on a log-log graph. And so I thought that was actually a really great idea. There's a lot of mathematical reasoning behind that it's too hard to get into, but the thing I would say quickly is that we know humans perceive a lot of things logarithmically, one example of which is like volume, right? Like if you add 10 decimals to your volume, you're actually really doubling it. You're not adding some 10 somethings, you're actually doubling it, right? So, I thought that was an excellent idea. However, making a logarithmic sigmoid curve in the gain graph, which is what I wanted to do, is not does not have a clean antiderivative, which again is a mathematical thing. What that really means is we have to calculate the curve beforehand, like algorithmically. We have to say what is the value here, and then we add a little bit, and we say what is the value there, and we add a little bit more, and we say what is the value there, and we just do that. We have like 2,000 values or something, and we stick it in a lookup table. And then when you're actually a user using it and you move your mouse, it doesn't have to do all that complex calculation right then. It just looks in the lookup table. And so that's how Motivity came about. And it was kind of an awesome feat of engineering for two people in like one day, in my opinion. Because me and Simon whipped that out in like a day, and it just worked magic. Right away.
Oh yeah, those are like the days when you go home from work and you're like, I really did that. Like,
yeah, exactly. It was very much that. I was like, wow, that just worked. Yeah, there was a lot of thinking and reasoning behind that, and I know I've glossed over some of it. I would just say eventually I'm going to make a video explaining all of the thoughts and ideas behind it, and perhaps asking people to evaluate some new ideas, because there's been more development there that is too complex for me to just summarize right here. So.
That's great. Povohat, you have any thoughts on that?
Look, I've used Raw Accel a little bit when I first heard about it, which is, I think you directed me towards it, which is really cool. I loaded it up. I was immediately drawn to the mystique of the Motivity, because I had no idea what it was at that point. And I think that it's a very natural feeling kind of curve once you get it set up. My thought process behind Accel is I don't like anything super obvious. I like it to be kind of almost like it doesn't feel like it's there at all, and that's what that one does for me personally. I quite like it. And it makes sense if the calculations, just regarding the lookup table thing, I don't think there's a problem with that. There's so many, things that we trust that are, driven by lookup tables. I think that it's an absolute, it's a good trade-off to make if the calculations are going to end up swamping your OS while you move the mouse. It makes sense to do that in an optimized way. So that's a good that was a good solution as well. I wasn't aware of that, so that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of practicality, right? It makes that perfect jump curve. Like the jump curve's like a tried and true setup, and that really perfects it. And for the viewers, that's like you start here, go up here, very quickly, but naturally now. Yeah, so I guess going on to the jump curve, what are the benefits of an offset and then limits for you guys? I don't know if you guys are all about it, or but what are you guys' thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think I'm not the biggest fan of the offset thing. I'm not sure how you feel about it. I don't know if I should go first or second, because I'm maybe in the con kind of category.
You should. I'm interested. What do you think of? What do you think of your offset?
So, I mean, one of the things I'll mention, every setting that was in the driver and the application that I came up with is purely because they exist in Quake Live, in the Quake Live implementation of Accel. I added a whole bunch of other like stupid things later on because people wanted them, but the offset thing, I feel like it makes sense for people. Because if you think about Accel as actually being Accel, like your mouse moves faster, when it's applied, people don't want that all the time. They'll want their normal thing they're used to at the low speed, so their tracking is good, and then they want the ability to kind of do a flick on their smaller mouse pad, and have the faster kind of flick turn sort of speed, whatever that is. The reason I don't like it is that, I mean, tracking happens at very, I don't know, it really depends on the game. But for me, playing things like Quake World and TF2 as a scout, tracking happens at different distances. So yeah, you can't really separate your movement into like, well, low speed has to be tracking and high speed has to be flicking. If you're trying to track at a close range, often you're going to end up running over that kind of offset and hitting Accel. That's the issue that I was running into. That was kind of the main thing. And so I feel like maybe rather than an offset, you just have kind of a gentler kind of Accel that kind of, you're always in Accel, but only at sort of slight amounts of those lower speeds. I think that's something that I prefer for what I was playing. But I see the option is there, and a lot of people were using it. But it's not something that made a lot of sense for what I was doing personally.
So I actually feel pretty similarly in some ways. Definitely agree with what you said about tracking happens at different distances and therefore different mouse speeds, because you need to move your mouse different distance depending on how far away your enemy is, right? And so I can only speak to the curves that felt good to me and what I've gotten good with. But the way mouse acceleration works in Counter-Strike, which I copied over to interaccel, is that there's basically an offset of like one mouse count per frame, and therefore that would be, depending on your FPS, that's going to be a different offset, but it's not going to be very fast. It's going to be a very, very, very low offset, right? So I say I prefer a really low offset because that's what I'm used to. And some players seem to have gotten used to more. On a bigger offset, I run into the same problem that Povohat ran into with overtracking different distances. And a similar problem is why I like to get all my Accel actually in the very slow speeds of movement, because if I just get it all over those slow speeds, then I have more control over where the Accel hits and how much Accel I'm getting, right? Because I can very easily move my mouse like 0.4 inches per second or 0.5 inches per second because I'm using the fine control with my wrist. But if I'm going like 3 inches per second or above, it's hard for me to choose which amount of Accel I'm using. And so having an offset kind of cuts into that space I have to accelerate some. So I kind of like a really small one. That seems to feel good to me, but I wouldn't go for a big one.
I can also touch on it for how I've been using Motivity. I've recently started using Raw Accel shortly after running into the Discord and running into Povohat again. And for me, what I like about it is I can stay at these really slow tracking speeds for most things, but at one wrist flick, I can immediately get to the top speed. So really, I'm playing at like 52 centimeters the entire time. And then if I ever need a flick and make a crisp, I know that almost immediately I'm gonna be around 36, because like one flick and I'm there. And then I also use it kind of cheat in the sense that instead of having to worry about full mouse resets, where you have your mouse pad, you have to move back to a beginning point, I can just click back. And I know one wrist flick back can get me close enough on my mouse pad that I can just keep going. But that's how I play with it. I know my favorite curve is, I have to show you guys at some point, but it was similar. It was a limit cap. It started at 64 centimeters, and then it would keep going just continuously, linearly, until it got to around 42 centimeters, and then it would just stop there. And then, yes, it was nice being able to control everything from up there. I really used it to, like I said before, abuse that that smoothness. But now that I'm a lot smoother, thanks to Kovacs, FPS aim trainer, I can now play comfortably at that 52 centimeters, but still have that ability to flick up very quickly. And I think Accel is one of those things that you have to be using constantly. You really have to grind it out. Because when I was playing really comfortably and playing it with Accel for such long periods of time, then yeah, I was able, you have to be relaxed. Like you can't come like hyped up on coffee or having a bad day or something and then try and play with Accel. You're going to be all over the place depending on your temperament, unless you just are fully one with the Accel. So I feel like that's the one thing, especially when you're playing duel. I feel like if you're just like nervous or having a bad day and you're playing with Excel, all of a sudden the shots that you would normally hit just aren't there just because it's one of those big boomer busts as long as it's a very mental thing. So always having that tracking baseline where I'm just comfortably playing without Excel and then still being able to make the flicks, I feel like it's a nice medium for me. Um,
Yeah, that's definitely a way of doing it.
yeah. But I mean, every Excel has its value for sure.
Well,
Um,
I would say that, and I think this is going to tie into your next question, but I would say that, every time I play a first person shooter game, I kind of, you spend some amount of energy relearning, like in that time, how to do things in the moment, right? How to aim, how to move, how to do everything. It's like your brain kind of half remembers, and then it needs to fill in some of its local cache or whatever you want to call
mhm,
it with the immediate, how do I do things super crisply
mhm,
right now. And I feel like having Excel makes that process take a little longer, but it also makes it potentially more refined once you have it all in there and ready. And so I have turned Excel on and off actually over the years. And I played some seasons of Counter-Strike with it and some without it. And a lot of it had to do with how much time I had to play. And if I didn't have a lot of time to play, I would usually, turn it off just because it took a little longer to feel fully warmed up and ready with it. But if I was playing a lot, I would turn it on, and then I do think I was more comfortable and a little better with it. So that's how I feel about it, at least.
that's very true. I use Excel a lot more when I was heavily grinding Kovacs and stuff. Now, some of the scores I set on that linear curve, I still haven't beat, or will have just like beat recently. So I feel like when you have a really good grip on Excel, your highs are way higher for sure.
Yeah, definitely agree.
hmm Um, and then I guess the next thing would be, what would you guys recommend to someone who doesn't use Excel but is interested? I know a lot of people seem like they've or been on the fence, especially when you talk to them about the benefits depending on the game and such. So, what would you guys recommend?
What I would say is, I mean, you need to know what needs fixing. Um, that's kind of the main thing. I mean, I don't know if that's the right way to approach it. That's sort of what I think about. It's like if I'm playing something, and I guess nowadays with these aim trainers, it's a lot quicker to figure out what it is you're missing. If you're finding that, I don't know, you're running out of mouse pad because you're doing a lot of very long tracking and your sensor's too low and you can't increase it or you lose your precision, um, you know, uh, that's going to require a different approach to someone that is playing a game that's sort of faster and more movement or action sort of oriented that needs to sort of keep they need to keep that sort of high end speed, but they just want a little more precision at the low end. I feel like it might be a case by case basis kind of thing, and it might heavily depend on the game as well. If I think about games, I don't know a lot of new stuff, so you'll have to like maybe I'll try and relate it to you. So, like with games that are very movement heavy, like Quake World and CPMA, like your pro mode kind of Quake physics,
hmm
they're very movement heavy. And in particular in Quake World, like being able to do long, smooth movements, like multiple turnarounds in a sort of single sequence, that's going to require a very different setup to someone that is going to be mostly stationary, but needs a lot of precision, at longer distances and things like that. So I would find it really difficult to recommend like a one size fits all kind of thing. I think I wonder how you could develop a guide to try and figure out or point people in the sort of direction they need to go based on what game or
hmm
what sort of sensitivity they're currently used to.
Yeah, I mean, just look at how much effort people put into just finding the sensitivity in the first place.
Oh yeah. I think the video though Did you guys have that guide to Excel? It's like 30 minutes. I think one of your moderators worked on it. That was a really good point for where to get started, just as he was like, okay, so I'm going in here, or my flick's doing this, or my tracking doing this. I know for me, one thing that I noticed was so for like my rocket jumps, right? When I was using just a linear curve, the rocket jumps were great, super smooth. But then once I switched to the offset, initially I had it like maybe 30, and I couldn't do any rocket jumps. It was bad. It was bad. Um,
Yeah.
but then once I moved it to, I noticed it was because vertically, my flicks vertically aren't the same as my flicks horizontally, right? So I needed something that I could do a vertical flick to get that rocket jump, to get into that Excel for my jump. I need to change the offset. Um, I think that's just a good starting point, is knowing like, are your flicks where you want them to be? Um, Tracking, do you feel comfortable at those? But yeah, I think it's very game dependent. Depending on what you're trying to do in each game and what you're trying to fix. I think that would be like a great starting point on every guide, would be, what with your aim are you trying to fix? Honestly, it would almost be interesting if you made like a Kovacs guide saying like, using these certain scenarios. There were certain scenarios I used, like, can I do ground plaza? Can I do air with this? Like, I had to make sure I could do ground plaza, kill all of the bots comfortably with ground plaza before I felt comfortable saying, okay, I can play on this Excel. Um,
I think that's an interesting idea, but I think it misses something important, which is the particular game's movement.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
you know, Povohat here made a good point, which is it really depends, like on the game, right? And he was talking about how you need something different for a game where you want precision over long distance. And I play Counter-Strike, which is basically that game. And so, I was playing competitively for a few seasons. At first without Excel, right? Because I had to remove Povohat's driver because we were playing ECA.
mhm,
But I found that I can't really aim with the consistency against players of the caliber I was playing against with any sensitivity higher than about 70 centimeters per 360. But if I've used that sensitivity all the time, I would get pretty tilted in like pickup games or when I was trying something new with my team, because unexpected things would happen. And I also would have trouble clearing corners, or, if something unexpected
mhm.
happened, turning behind me. And so I don't think that captured quite by a Kovac scenario, but it's definitely, would be captured by thinking about what problem are you trying to solve. Well, the problem I was trying to solve is I need to be able to smoothly look behind me and react to more variety of scenarios with moving my hand a little less, but still have that precision in long range. And so for that curve, in a Counter Strike or Valorant type game, I'd recommend like 30 to 50% acceleration from your base to top sensitivity, and that you hit it with a medium to slow hand motion, so that you get it all at the start, and then after that you're smooth. And I found that works really, really well. And you can get that with natural game, you can get that with Motivity, and you can even get it with my favorite in the long run curve, the power curve, which I got from Counter Strike. So
Mhm.
I think that's what I would recommend to someone in my specific game who has my problem. That's what I would do.
You have some testimonials. That's what this sounds like. When you have testimonials, I was trying to fix this problem. I did it
Yeah,
with this.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of my goal of the Post Your Curve channel and my mouse acceleration Discord that I
Mm.
help run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still need to post my curve. Yeah. It really shocked me seeing that there was an acceleration Reddit, like a subreddit for it. I was like, wow, the world's changed. Like, so I mean, kudos. It's amazing just seeing how. Yeah, I'm gonna have to post my curves.
Yeah, you should do it.
Yeah, name's really name's really hilarious though. Um, the next topic is I guess we kind of touched on that. Um,
Yeah.
in CS versus Excel in Quake and Excel
I
in
would make
playtime.
one more point there.
Yeah.
And there's like every game has its specific things that you don't realize until you play the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's what the thing in Counter-Strike and Valorant that players who don't play at a high level don't realize. And I don't play at the highest level anymore, but I used to be like Sivo main. I used to be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem you run into the game is like it becomes less like, oh, am I a good FPS player? And more of, okay, can I headshot this person like within 100 milliseconds or whatever of them peeking around the corner at me? And like, how good am I at that particular very focused, very specific thing every time? And that's a very hard thing to get good at. That takes a lot of practice, right? Like anyone could go, I mean, not anyone could go be really good at Kovacs, but Kovacs is very general. And the very specific thing in Counter-Strike is like, I have no time. I have to get one shot in this very specific place very fast. And Excel for that, in my opinion, you cannot have too high of an Excel value. Like, I don't think you can do more than like 30 to 50%. And I don't think even that you can have rise too fast, because if you do, then you're going to lose that game just off of tiny inconsistencies that cause a tiny change. But I think with reasonable Excel, you can still do very, very well at that game. So that's my opinion.
If we're still talking about the CS, because I don't think I've really played CS:GO too much. But you're referring to this power curve. Is that the only kind of Excel in CS, or is that an option in CS for Excel?
So it's the only good option. So the thing is, mouse acceleration in CSGO is FPS dependent. So it just calculates per frame and it doesn't normalize by the time the frame took. And so CSGO also offers a linear option, or I guess more like a classic option in Quake, where you can add an exponent as well. But the problem with that option is that because it's FPS dependent, you really feel the difference between different FPSs. Like, 250 frames per second, you will get, like 80% of the Excel you get at 300 FPS. And so that becomes a real issue. And also that the scopes don't work with it. So if you have the linear option in Counter-Strike checked for mouse acceleration, then scoping in does not apply a scope sensitivity when you scope. So your mouse is way, way, way too fast when you scope in, which is kind of hilarious and awful. So the only other option they have is the power curve. And in that one, it's also FPS dependent, but they were smart in making the curve the way they did, because a small FPS variation will instead cause like a 2% change in sensitivity instead of a 20% change. And 2% still isn't good, but it's much more workable. And, you get used to the way your FPS fluctuates on your machine. And as long as you have a pretty good machine, you'll be pretty consistent with it.
People have similar complaints. Sorry.
You go.
I was going to say, people had similar complaints with Quake Champions implementation of Excel. It's also FPS dependent. So Povohat gained like a huge rebirth or an additional jump when Quake Champions was released, because then you couldn't use the Quake Live Excel, and you were just stuck going to you just couldn't play at the Quake Champions Excel with the differences in FPS.
Yeah, to me that's incredible, because it's such an easy thing to fix in the engine. It's like very trivial, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've played a bit of TF2. I played a whole bunch of that like for about 6 years. And I feel like the mouse Excel options in that were very similar to what you're describing.
I think it's the same. I'm talking about M_custom Excel 3.
Yeah, and there's I don't remember what number 2 was. 2 was something weird that you would never use for some reason.
It was the same as 1, but they don't apply yaw and pitch. I don't know why. That doesn't make sense to me either, but that's how it is.
That's strange. The other thing as well with Custom Excel 3, is that the one that calculates X and Y separately?
No.
Okay, cool. Just double checking on that. It's been a little while, but that doesn't sound like a good idea if that was the case.
Well, some people like that, but I think you kind of have to know that that's what's going on for it to feel good. Yeah. So.
I'm not sure if I think we're kind of on Excel in CS versus Excel in Quake. I just want to point out, I think even as far back as Quake 1, there was some kind of mouse Excel in there, but it was literally just M_Excel, and you would set values somewhere between 0 and 1. So it's been around for a while. I'm not sure if people were really using it back then. But yeah. I'm not sure there's too much more to talk about as far as Quake stuff's concerned. But I will say pretty much my understanding of Excel and like the reason I used it is because they extended the functionality of it so much in Quake Live. Like up until Quake 3 was kind of re-released as the browser game and then eventually a standalone game in Quake Live. There was some point late in the development, one of the developers, can't remember who it was. It might have been Sync Error. It might have been someone else. But they added all these mouse Excel customization things. That's kind of what I had to copy. What I essentially copied for my one. I feel like they deserve a little bit of praise for that. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. But then again, they might have copied it from source. So who knows?
Yeah, it was a really good implementation, in my opinion. Probably the best in a AAA game, other than Diabolical, which just came out. But had all the years to learn all the things, so huge leap forward. I agree.
And speaking on Diabolical also has natural gain, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it has natural, but not natural gain. Last I checked.
Natural. Okay, so what would natural be listed as? That just be classic, or is that something different?
No, it's that there is a natural option in Raw Accel that is the exact same.
Okay. So what separates the natural from natural gain?
Oh boy, this is the thing I said is really complex. You should go read my Google document. It comes down to like the slope of the velocity graph. If you in natural, there's a point where the slope increases and then decreases, and I think that feels ugly. Some people might not feel the same way, but I made natural gain as a way to get a very similar behavior without that increase and then decrease in the slope of the velocity graph.
There we go. I guess then going on to the next question. What is the future of Excel in AAA games and mouse drivers? Where do we think Excel is going to go from here? And I guess piggybacking on this, the same way you guys are reaching out to the different anti-cheats, there's probably going to be in the future as this becomes more popular. You guys need to reach out to tournament coordinators once we get back to a time where we can have LANs and things like that. So I guess what's the next step? Where you guys think the industry is going with this?
Okay. The future of Excel. It's hard because I think I can just see this problem happening if Excel, like customizable acceleration, is built into games, it's built into mouse drivers, and we have our sort of third-party sort of independent solutions like raw input. There's going to be someone that's using all three of them and having an absolute nightmare. It would be nice to have like some sort of standardized kind of, this is how you do Excel. The problem is there's just, some mouse vendors have whatever flavor of acceleration they want to build in if they choose to. You've got some games that have some options for acceleration. It's so it's all over the place. I think it's a good sign that there are multiple places, multiple vendors, games, that can implement mouse acceleration. I don't know how you bring all that together and make it more accessible and easier to set up and more accepted. It really feels like the future is going to be a whole bunch of vendor and game specific implementations, because it's hard to imagine one type of acceleration that's going to cover everything unless you let people kind of upload their own lookup tables or throw in their own formulas or something like that. That would be very, very cool, but I'm not sure how yeah, it's hard to know. It's really hard to know if this is going to be something that takes off and is more accessible. And you don't have to, install, all this software and stuff like that. I don't know. I really don't know what we can expect to see in the future, whether it's going to consolidate or just have 20 different options, or if it's just going to disappear completely. Yeah, I'd like to see what happens.
Just specifically talking about lookup tables, we were playing around with the idea of allowing the user to hand a lookup table to Raw Accel and then using that for acceleration in the program. We're not quite there yet. Again, we're just playing around with the idea, but we might implement that at some point so that you could use any arbitrary code or curve you could possibly think of in the program, which would be pretty cool, right? But we're not there yet. Otherwise, I pretty much agree with you. Where do I see this going? I think where this goes is really going to depend on how many people start using Accel or clamor for Accel from driver companies and game companies. And I agree with Povohat very much that it might fracture into a million different types of input. I personally think it would be much better if all these games decided to rely on one library to determine how input changes your input in a game, so that they could use one library, so that I don't have to go set my sensitivity separately in X different games. We could just all use the same library. Perhaps it could be made by NVIDIA or someone else, like a DirectX type thing. But I don't know if that will happen. I think it would be an awesome thing if it did happen. But other than that, I don't think there can be anything else, other than a set of fractured solutions to mouse acceleration. So I do hope that people keep using mouse acceleration and keep refining what it is that we like about mouse acceleration so that we continue to make better curves and better implementations of this. I think there's a lot of thinking still to be done there. I think that if we ever come up with or stumble onto a really good answer to that, we will potentially gain a lot of users, and then perhaps through clamoring get a more concentrated answer. But we'll have to see if that happens. Yeah. So I think we need to continue as a community. We need to continue trying to use it, continue trying to figure it out, continue trying to think about it. I think depending on how that goes, we can have all sorts of different futures of acceleration. So,
very well put. I guess this is kind of like a late question. Could have been a little earlier. What are you guys' thoughts on negative Accel? This is more prevalent, I think, with the Kinzu and some early Steel Series mice. Just what are you guys' thoughts? Could you explain it more in detail? Is anything on that note?
I hate it. When I move my hand faster, I want my cursor to move faster. I don't have anything else beyond saying that. If I'm swiping really hard to shoot, to engage with an enemy, I don't want my sensitivity to lower. I feel like that would make it more difficult if someone is all the way behind me and I need to try to do a 180 real fast. That'll make that almost impossible. That's something I have to do often in the games I play. So it would not be good for me in the games I play. And I've yet to see a case where I thought it would be a good solution to a problem, but I'm open to that case being brought forward.
I think the main use case for it is the boomer gamers. I mean, we're all older, but the guys maybe strengths, and people who use those mice and got used to the Accel on them, and now are looking for a way to replicate that on the games that they play.
The Kinzu V1, I assume that you mentioned strengths, and I think Evil is the other notable sort of Quake guy that used those. That was the reason I sort of looked out for those. I've got about three I think I've got 3 kinzu V1s. One of them got turned into a kinzu adder. I think the other 2 are pretty much intact. That mouse is the Negative Accel. It's the least weird thing about that mouse, if you ask me. There's a lot of funky stuff going on in that one. But it is heavily limited in its max speed. But just with Negative Accel in general, I think that mouse and the wheel mouse optical, which also experiences that as well. I'm not sure how many other mice kind of experience this in the same sort of way. It's more, in my understanding of those, is it's kind of it's a data clipping kind of issue where if you move it faster than a certain speed, you've hit a certain number. I think 127 or negative 127 or something, and so that's just the limit of the microcontroller that they're using. They have to clip it and just send it out. They can't send it a value larger than that in the same interval. So it's kind of like a data path kind of clipping, is my understanding of that one. And obviously you change the polling rate, that's going to drastically change what speed that's going to happen at. Negative Accel, I liked it. I really don't find a good use for it. I mean, I'm experiencing it all the time, probably using a wheel mouse optical, so I don't, it's not something I have really compared it too much against, but I sit well under that sort of range most of the time anyway. But the other thing about Negative Accel, what was it going to be? I've tried and figure out a use case, like where could that be useful? Because what it kind of essentially does, I mean, once you go above a certain speed, it sort of turns your mouse into like a game controller analog stick. Like it's just pushing in one direction at a fixed particular value. So I wonder if you set it low enough in a particular game, there might be a good use to have it so low. Like if I could custom set a value that would allow me to have, I don't know, a certain turning rate that would work well for, getting a good initial circle jump in games that have that kind of that sort of physics. I don't know. But I think in general, like unless I try and find a really weird edge case, I don't know if there's a function for the Negative Accel. It should be more, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But having said that, the kinzu and the wheel mouse optical are the only mice I know of that are by their sensor is an ST microelectronics sensor. I'm sure there are other ones out there, but it's kind of weird that those two are the ones that experience some similar phenomena as far as the negative, the diagonals at low speed. I think those are kind of the common traits they have that you don't really see in other mice. I think usually with other mice, of that kind of era, you move too fast, it doesn't just Negative Accel, it just spazzes out and you end up staring at the ceiling or floor, depending on your setup. So it's kind of good that they can handle that, but yeah, overall Negative Accel, we'll have to give that the thumbs down.
I agree. I just that's interesting that there's that rare niche that is just so used to it. We haven't seen it yet implement. We're stuck like using mice from the dawn of time or to replicate that feeling.
Yeah, I had no idea, honestly, that those mice had Negative Accel. I thought the Kinzu had positive Accel, so shows that I know.
Yeah, I mean it does. That's the weird thing about it, right? And it also, depending on the firmware, you get like heavy angle snapping or path correction or whatever PR version of that you want to call it. We can call it a rounding error if you like. But yeah, there's a lot of weird things about that, and I think one of the funny things is I don't know if they intended it to have Accel, but they made it seem that way based on the FAQ on the SteelSeries site. It was quite a good spin they put there. But it's a strange mouse. Definitely has huge positive Accel, but above a certain speed, it does kind of clip, which feels like negative Accel.
Oh, got it. Interesting. Very interesting. I'd love to see if anyone can dig up like an old document on it. That'd be pretty interesting. Like a SteelSeries overview of it or whatever. That'd be cool. One of my favorite players in Counter-Strike, Guardian, used that for a long time. So
He's waiting for the Raw Accel Kinzu edition.
cool to know what curve was.
Yeah, I think we already talked about just buying the Accel related to Windows Accel, but what I guess how would you talk to someone who the first thing they knew when they got into gaming was Accel is bad, turn off Windows Mouse Accel, make sure none of your games have Accel on. Like, what would you do to just broaden their horizons? Accel.
So I feel like I can handle this one pretty well because I was that person. Windows Accel was a really good solution to a problem. I want to actually speak positively about it for a minute. Windows Accel was a really good solution to a problem they had in 1995, which was like, I am an office worker with a really tiny mouse pad and a really low CPI mouse. And I need to be able to click on these icons without, having a huge mouse pad. And so I think it was a great solution at the time. And they did it without any doubles. They did it without anything more than fixed point math. And so fixed point math kind of limits what you can do quickly. And it was actually a really good piece of code for the time in terms of running very quickly in your kernel. They really, really stripped it down to run real fast. However, obviously once processors got a little faster, we didn't need to have an awful guess of it doesn't run the Pythagorean theorem to figure out how fast your mouse is moving. It figures out the max and the minimum of your X and Y and divides the minimum by 2 and adds that to the max. And that's how it guesses about how fast you're going. So it has a lot of weird quirks to it. And the problem is not that it wasn't good, it's that it was never updated. And so another problem with it is, there's two more problems. The one is that it's very aggressive. It ends up having a factor of 4.7 times the base sensitivity at the top. And the other problem is that it's not smooth. It has 4 sections to it instead of one big smooth section. And so I think any beginner or any person who is dead set against acceleration could be convinced, any honest person could be convinced to at least give acceleration a try, or maybe to consider it something viable, if they learn that the default thing they've been using for a long time is actually not at all the best implementation for gaming. If they learn that, oh yeah, that thing I had to turn off because it was so bad is legitimately bad for my purposes, but there's another version of that is much, much better for my purposes. Well, okay, maybe I'll give that a try. And that's what changed my mind. It was that and seeing all the players who were very, very good with acceleration that said, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing ever, but I'm going to give it a shot and see how it works.
The other thing, while we're talking about the Windows Accel curve thing, I think I didn't notice it at the time. It was only when I started reading about it. Apparently, some of the early versions of Windows had a bug where they were using the display refresh rate rather than the polling rate of the mouse to kind of figure out speed, which is obviously a bit of a problem.
So I know about this very well. Long story, but I actually just dissected I decompiled the binary in Windows that does this. And I don't think that's what's going on. I know that's what Mark C reported, and I don't quite think that's what's happening because they're not actually figuring out anything about your mouse on the fly. The only thing they're figuring out on the fly is your screen DPI factor, which is one of your choices in Windows, right? And so I think instead they just have some weird constants hard-coded in for assumptions of what your screen refresh rate and what your mouse CPI and pull rate are. And the assumptions are way out of date. They don't make any sense. Like they assume everyone has a mouse of 400 CPI and about 133 hertz pull rate, which doesn't make any sense. No one has that mouse. But, you know, they instead of figuring out anything, they just hard coded in some weird assumptions and left it. So it can definitely seem like they put the wrong constants in, but I think it's just a case of weird constants and not like a mess up of the Windows engineers. I think the Windows engineers actually did know what they were doing, and they just didn't care about gaming purposes. But I might be wrong.
Yeah. I think the other thing that is good about the landscape we have now is that we, you know, the vast majority, as far as I understand, like pretty much all games, the Windows pointer kind of response doesn't matter for input anymore. It was kind of an artifact of the older titles.
So what I know is that some of the old titles forced you to turn on enhanced pointer precision, in other words, to turn on Windows Mouse Accel. And then they all used the Windows Mouse queue. And then one of the games wanted a raw input queue, so Windows added that, I think, or somehow Windows decided to just give you the option to get the raw input straight from the mouse driver. And then games began to use that. And that's what a lot of AAA titles now use instead of the Windows mouse queue. And I agree that that's a huge step forward in terms of the landscape, because the Windows options are all over the place.
Mm-hmm. We have a question in the chat from Squanching45. I recently started using Custom Curve Mouse Accel program. Is it any good?
So that program uses the Intercept mouse library, same as interaccel did. It is more fully featured because it allows you to put any sort of it uses splines and lets you draw your points on the graph directly to make your own curve, which is pretty cool. But its flaw, again, is that it uses the Intercept mouse driver. And so you will be not unable to use that program for competitive games with certain anti-cheats, right? So it's a great program, but it is limited in some ways.
You said in the future you're going to at least look into adding a way to create your own custom curves.
Yeah, we were talking about it. I don't like to make any claims for me and Simon, but first of all, it's open source, so anyone could if they wanted to. But it's definitely on my list of things I would like to eventually do. It's not exactly on the top of the list, but not on the bottom either.
I guess that really covers all the topics. Is there anything that anyone else feels like hasn't been addressed that they would like to address? And then do we have anything from the chat? I guess I could start off with just something I'd like to address. I know some games have like ADS and irregular sensitivity. How do you think people use this? I feel like this kind of helps people in some ways because you can set like your ADS to like what you feel comfortable aiming on, and then you can set your regular sensitivity to how you feel like just for like moving and stuff. How would you recommend Accel to those users?
So
I mean, that's kind of tricky, isn't it?
That's a really tricky one, yeah.
I never used ADS, not really, not more than the AWP in Counter-Strike, or I guess the AUG when that was a thing. And honestly, in the few times I used it, I never thought about it. So I don't really have a good answer offhand. I think it's the same as anything where, like Povohat said earlier, you have to figure out what's your problem, what type of problem do you want to solve, right? Like, I think you have to do some thinking and understand how your hand motions differ from your normal hand motions when you have ADS, and come up with a curve. Since you can't apply a different curve every time you do ADS, I would come up with a curve that works for both that and your normal play style. That would probably be my quick answer.
Yeah.
Immediately, I was kind of thinking, like, should Accel be calculated after the ADS sense scaling? In which case, then it would have to be built into the game, or is it better if Accel is kind of calculated prior to the ADS sort of scaling?
I think it's better if it's before, personally. I mean, I used to have a script a long time ago in CSGO that would make it so, right when I was trying things out with Accel, right, that would make it so every time I scoped in, it would apply a different Accel factor.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, really messed with my aiming. I was not able to make that work. Maybe I was using the wrong values. Maybe, I didn't know what I was doing, but that didn't seem to work for me. I felt like I still kind of in my head somehow knew about what mouse count should be sent when to move the scope, even though I was like, I know that sounds kind of weird, but I knew about, how far I needed to move my hand to make what happen in terms of acceleration. And I feel like with or without the scope, that wasn't a big difference. And I feel like aim down sights is a similar issue,
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, maybe someone can make that work, but if you're having a different curve when you are in a different view in the game, then I do feel like you're going to have to learn a new set of hand motions for that new view in the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to take even more time to learn, right? So
yeah. I guess adding on to it, while we agree that this would be really difficult, would it be possible to have a key, like knowing that when you click the key that would normally be your ADS, to apply a different curve?
It would not be possible in Raw Accel.
Okay.
Because of the anti-cheat reasons.
That's why I was thinking. Would that
because
work?
if you could do that, you could make that just to drive this to the end. You could make that curve really, really fast, and then a cheat could toggle that key right to make your mouse spin until it wanted to stop spinning. You can then use that to aim for you.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason why I've noticed in BRs, aim down sights has become more and more prevalent with like the Fortnites and the Apexes. And for them, I mean, it gets crazier and crazier because they have like various different scopes and like things like that too. So like a huge rabbit hole for those games.
Yeah. I gotta be honest, I'm not into those games.
No, neither am I. But if once the Fortnite players start using something, it becomes viral. I remember when the Fortnite players discovered Kovacs. Kovac probably, the game went from probably like 30 people playing it at any one time to like maybe like 300 to 400, 500 people playing it at any one time. And as it got more and more popular, now there's like 2,000 people playing it at any one time or so. But I remember what changed it. It was just all of us who played. And then once the Fortnite players started, it just changed overnight. All of a sudden, there was this huge audience playing the game. And that's for everything. I remember the Glee pad that a friend of mine made. Kovac actually has two of them. And once a pro Fortnite player posted it, Gunfly, he posted it on his channel or on his Twitter. And then next thing you know, there was such a demand for that the mouse pads that the creator literally just couldn't make them anymore at that point. Like he became so back ordered into oblivion.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best chance of something getting massively adopted. I mean, to an extent, there's things like Overwatch and Valorant, which lead to some big gains. But once the Zoomer generations, once they start using it, it becomes like life changing overnight.
So from the little I've seen of Fortnite and Apex gameplay, which seems very different to me, even though they're both battle royales.
Very different. Yeah.
I do feel like Accel would be really good because you don't need like I said, you can have a slightly slow reaction time and still be very good in those games. It's not as demanding for immediate reactions as some other games based on a lot of positioning and other factors. So I feel like Accel would be really, really great for those games. And I would like to, as far as ADS goes, I thought about it a little more, and I do think it's important that you always have the same curve even when you're zoomed in, because it really is your hand motion causing a certain type of change in the game, and it's really important that that's just one type of change. Yeah, one thing in your brain to hold on to at a time. So I would recommend not trying to set up all sorts of crazy different profiles for ADS or not ADS or anything like that. But could be wrong. That's one point I'd address, is I could be wrong about any and all of this, and I would love to see someone prove me wrong. That's the thing I want most, is someone to come in and say, hey, have you thought about it like this? Have you thought about it like that? I would love for someone to come up with some documents or some math or something to show how they think about this.
Yeah. I think going on to that, like the sniper key, I never understood how people could play with the sniper key on any game. Every time I always tried to use it, I was confused and lost. But I know there are some people that swore by it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you kind of try out, and because you think it's going to be really good, but then when you actually try it, it's really horrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's a mouse marketing thing, right?
Oh,
look at this new feature. It's going to be so great. I got to get that mouse.
Mister, we had a great discussion on how DPI got to the point to where it what it truly means about sensors and why it became such an advertising point, but what you can actually gain in value from it. That was an episode too. Briefly speaking on it, because sensors are built to have higher resolutions right now. Generally, if it's an optical sensor, the higher the DPI, that probably means the better the sensor is because of its resolution. Even though no one's gonna play on those DPIs, it just tells you it's a higher quality sensor. But that it started because the first few mice that, until they got up to like 1600, once you got to that number, like it actually did make a difference for gamers.
Yeah.
But
actually, the higher DPI is better for Mouse Accel because it's like more points on the curve you can hit. It's not that much better past, like you said, past 1600. It's not that big of a difference. But I had Logitech's new G Pro, not the new G Pro wire, it's the super light one, but I had the one before that, and then I had the MX518, which both have the 16K or 25K DPI sensors respectively. So I spent a few months playing at 12K DPI with my Raw Accel curve and all my in-game sensitivities adjusted for it, and honestly I couldn't tell a difference. It seemed to work great. I didn't feel any smoothing and didn't see anything wrong with it. It worked great. So
Squanching in the chat also says he uses an ADS sense, which is half of his regular sense with the linear curve, and he likes it. So there we go.
Very cool.
Also, I remember I was talking with Simon about this. I didn't fully understand it, but is it true that you can set, or are you able to set two different curves, like one for your X and one for your Y?
Yep. If you go into Advanced and you click by component, you can do that.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, or application style, advanced application style by component. And what's happening then is it's treating your X and Y motions like they come from two different mice. That's the easiest way to explain it. So it doesn't matter how fast your mouse is moving overall. It matters how fast it's moving in the X direction, how fast it's moving in the Y direction for each of those two curves to be hit. So, Pythagorean theorem isn't taken into account at all, is another way of saying it. And there are some people who think that that's better for a game where you might have to, do different things with your X and Y motions. Like you might have to track an enemy and also control your recoil separately with your X and Y, hand motions. They might think that it's better for that. And I personally don't like that. I think that they're wrong. Well, I think that they might be right in theory. It might work for them, but I never made it work for me. So that's how I feel about it. But the option's in there. If you want to use it, you can use it.
The only thing that I could see it being useful for, at least for my purposes, I had to change like I was saying before, I had to change my offset, or I guess it's midpoint. Um, but
Midpoint, yeah.
yeah, I had to change that because of my rocket jumps, which is pretty much mainly your y-axis stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, would it make sense to have that curve start a little bit quicker for that, or have some type of thing? Maybe not even that, but a portion, something to have that X, that Y move
So
a little bit faster.
I will say that at some point, I do plan on adding a feature to Raw Accel that will let you do that without using by component or needing to set separate X and Y curves or any of that. It will still use Pythagorean theorem. It will just have slightly less accel in the Y direction. I do plan on adding that eventually.
Good man. Good man. Leaks. Leaks. We love the leaks.
That's the only one you're going to get.
We've had some pretty big leaks on the podcast. We had a $500 mouse announcement, the M1KS. Had some crazy stuff. We had or I don't know if you use Lethal Gaming Gear, but they talked about their new productivity stuff, how they're gonna, what their future plans are, how they're gonna start meeting demand more in the future. We had some really interesting stuff leak out of here. This is a great place to just announce to the audience what's going on. But yeah, so I mean, that's definitely something I'm curious about. Maybe we could talk more offline on if there'd be a good way to fix that problem. But what would be, I guess, the issues with having an XY motivity curve with slightly different offsets or a slightly higher acceleration? You think that'd be something that could be gotten used to over time, or would this be very jarring?
I have no idea because I haven't tried it. I always like to stick it in there and then try it rather than speculate how it will feel.
Yeah.
But there's the math there gets kind of complicated, and I don't want to go over it too much, but someone had a really good idea on how to do it, and I think I'm going to try that idea out. So
okay. But this will be different from then just doing it through the by component.
It will be a generalization of that allows you to choose something in between whole and by component and allows you more control over that.
Okay. Cool. But the same thing can be achieved with by component, just with more tweaking, I'm guessing?
No, actually, because of the math.
Yes. Okay.
I'm one of those people where the math definition to me is the most real definition, and anything trying to put that into words is always like you're asking me to tell you what what the Mona Lisa looks like. It's like, okay, I can try, but you should really look at the thing.
I feel you. I'm gonna have to look at the idea. Is the idea posted in the chat somewhere or in the acceleration Reddit or anywhere?
No, actually, no. I'm going to make a video on it at some point. It's going to be the same video as the about how Motivity came about and further extension there. The idea was generated by that same person, so I kind of have to. I think you know some of the story there. I have to be very particular about how I put it together. So
okay. Yeah. All right. What a legend. Done so many interesting things under complete obscurity, but his reach is actually really far. But it's all so obscure. Mad respect to him. Interesting guy. Love him to death. All right. Yeah, I guess. Are there any more questions in the chat or anything that people might still have that they're thinking about or things they want to get off their chest? Their experiences with Excel, like that. And are there anything that you guys feel like has been left out in this conversation that you want to address?
I'm thinking about it.
I will say, a good way to probably market to Fortnite players if you could get a Fortnite player to try it, just even from the building and editing perspective, and see how they feel with it, that would be a good implementation. Like, because that's probably what their main concern is gonna be. Can it help them build, edit faster, do the things that they want to do, while maintaining the things that they normally want to maintain? But that would be the example approach I would go to for that.
Cool. I'll think about it.
I know Povohat's got something coming. He's gonna hit us with a really meaty topic that we didn't think about.
No, probably not. How about a selfish question? I've got a wheel mouse optical, but I'd rather sort of move into the 21st century. But it has to be the same shape and very similar weight. What do I do?
You probably want what is a mill mouse optical weigh?
Well, I think it's somewhere in the low 80s.
You probably want a Zowie mouse.
I've got a few. I got a few Zowie
Yeah,
mice.
he's thinking about the shape though too. You sound like such a CS boomer.
I'm sorry, man. Such a product of my environment.
Which of course makes sense with the Vaxi, the OG Zowie guys.
Oh man, it's good. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I see you. I see you out here. Probably uses a QCK or a GSR.
No, I have an artisan he and mid.
Okay. A man of culture.
You know?
Oh, you know, I've done plenty with Lexips. Yes. I probably made the first Lexip videos. Lexip has told me that I have the most purchases of Lexips in the United States.
Awesome.
Now,
for many years, you were right. I had the QCK heavy. So,
and the Hean's a great pad. Do you have it mid or do you have it?
I have mid.
Okay, yeah, I have a Hean mid as well. That's probably my favorite cloth pad to use.
It's barely cloth, but it's real.
Yeah. But especially, it's so thin, and the stitching is great.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, I kind of got to head off. It's been a late night here. Got holidays here. Got the people over now. Gotta come
I guess we're all on different times. It's 9 o'clock for me. What? It's like 6 o'clock for you.
Yeah, we're doing this Sunday.
Or 7 o'clock, and then yeah,
it's 2 p.m. here.
Yeah, I was gonna say from Australia. I know you must be starting off your afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me. This was pretty fun. It's nice talk to you. Povohat, thank you so much for making that awesome driver. It got me interested.
Thank you for stepping in and making the new one so I don't have random South Americans emailing me about it anymore.
Awesome. I'm glad to take that.
Oh, that's great. Great. Well, yeah, thank you guys both for coming, and thank you for working this into your schedule. I know it took some time to get this all together. I appreciate you guys. You guys are excellent guests.
No worries. Thanks so much, man. Have a good one.
It was an awesome time. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Glad you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the chat. And yeah, we'll be back probably next week or the week after. These videos will be put. I still have to get episode 3 on YouTube, and this episode will be on YouTube soon. I have pretty much the whole next week off for vacation, so I will be working on that. So yeah, look forward to it. And everyone have a blessed day and have a happy holiday.